to me, it just kind of, like I said, kind of sort of hit me of like, oh wow, like okay, this guy is a true difference maker at the major league level. Like, let's see what happens over the next several years.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. And the Red Hot Cubs had a really rough loss on Monday night. That was more like the Cubs, I guess, of May and June. Bullpen struggling after a brilliant starting pitching performance. I'm not going to take too much away from Jorge Lopez's one bad outing with the Cubs so far. If you want to freak out about this possibly being lingering issues from him being hurt, you're more than welcome to, but there were a couple bloops there, a Wrigley Field homer, that type of stuff happens. And I think the bigger concern right now would be Justin Steele, Patrick, who was scratched from Tuesday's start. Leave it to the Cubs to have all these positive vibes come into town, and then they lose that first one of the homestand in heartbreaking fashion, and then announce that their ace is scratched the next night.
Oh man, it was just like, and I don't know, I just, as you know, Sada, when you cover a team for a while, like, you just have this like sense or instincts. I was like, all right, if they were red hot on the road trip, they're gonna lose eventually, right? And I just had this sense of like, all right, I'm back on coverage tonight. You get a much needed break after traveling. I was like, something like this is gonna happen. And the 1-2 punch of the blown save and the post-game news dump was really disorienting, because it was all about vibes and how great the offense was. That was kind of the pregame talk, and how the Cubs have, solved a lot of things over the course of the year, and they've earned the right to have fun in September. And I guess to set the scene in the Wrigley Field interview room, Counsell was asked, a question about, what does it feel like to have a missed opportunity here in early September? And he said, feels like a loss. And Counsell was seemed to be a little chapped, which he normally isn't, as we know by this point. And then, just as an aside, he said, Kyle Hendricks will be starting tomorrow night. Justin Steele's been scratched. He has elbow soreness. And then we were all start to you're writing it down when you're kind of getting the update. And then, none of us had the presence of mind or the time to really have it fully register. And by the time I looked up, but Counsell was already standing up and walking away from the microphone. I'm not whining or complaining. It was just so shocking, because before the game, Counsell was asked about Kyle Hendricks, and it was, well, Kyle Hendricks is available out of the bullpen tonight, and then we'll see where it goes. You were on that road trip last week, and there were no indications, right, about a Justin Steele injury concern on the horizon.
No, I was more watching Tyone. He threw a bullpen Saturday, which to me was like, okay, so Jordan Wicks is definitely starting on Sunday. There was a mention of he could use an extra day. I'm not sure how much this was talked about in the press box, but on TV, they kept showing Tyone getting a heat thing on his back.
Okay.
So clearly his back had been bugging him, but not. I mean, he still threw 7 shutout innings. This is something that has popped up on and off throughout Tyone's career. I don't think that's concerning. This elbow thing has happened with Steele before. He's never missed significant time. I think he had an IL stint. Was that last year or this year? Wasn't there something with the forearm or something?
Yeah,
this
he's
year?
had, things that, when we don't have any information, sound alarming when you're talking about a great pitcher and elbow, forearm, stuff like that. And, I think by the time we get there Tuesday to Wrigley Field, they'll have at least some more information. But I'm kind of in the mode where like the Cubs have had so many injuries this year and the timelines have been vague, and I get that's kind of the nature of what they do. There's not a lot of time left on the calendar, obviously. And it just felt like that blown save and the Steele news just severely damaged what was already a very slim possibility of making the playoffs this year.
Oh yeah, yes. I mean, it dampens the positivity that was surrounding the
Like
team too, right?
immediately, yeah,
Right. It like you barely could enjoy what they'd just done. The fans could barely enjoy it at Wrigley, and that lead was lost quickly. I think it was a matter of like 8 pitches that Lopez threw, where it went from 3-0 to 4-3. Yeah, no, it's a. I mean, here's something that I think fans need to recognize as well. All the ones that are saying they should have gotten rid of Kyle Hendricks, who'd be starting right now if it were in Kyle Hendricks. They don't have anybody at AAA that could have made this start. So this is why you keep someone like Kyle Hendricks around, even when he's struggling, because starting pitching depth is like gold in Major League Baseball. You can't just get rid of guys, especially at this time of year. You don't know when injuries are going to pop up. They're really lucky that Jordan Wicks is healthy right now. Frankly, like that's probably the best thing that's happened right now. Wicks is healthy and able to give them innings, because they'd be in a big bind right now if it weren't for Kyle Hendricks still being on this team and Jordan Wicks getting healthy. So, things can change, right back into their favor if they can beat Paul Skeens. It would be it's a tall task right now. This is why when everyone is saying, well, these wins don't matter because these teams stink. Well, Jerry Jones and Paul Skeens and Mitch Keller are tough pitchers, and they beat them last week. And now that they put up 3 against Jerry Jones was a nice job. Now they got to do it again against Paul Skeens. So like this is it's not going to be an easy task. We knew they dug themselves such a big hole in May and June that just because they had a hot road trip doesn't mean anything was guaranteed. They gotta figure out ways to win these games. The Yankees this weekend, I think Nestor Cortez, Garrett Cole, and one other. I'm not sure who the other. I think it's like Will something. But I'm blanking on the name. So the pitching, Nestor Cortez isn't having the best season. So this may be a tougher series as far as pitching goes with the Pirates than the Yankees. But you still have to face Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. So, but we'll see what the pitching looks like. What the Cubs pitching looks like. I'm very curious to hear the explanation on the details on Steele. I don't know. This podcast could have sounded very differently, right? If they hold on to that lead, even like Steele news is big, but the way they performed over the weekend, I know it. Like everyone wants to point out the competition, but when you they weren't beating bad teams before, so like they were doing their job and really looking good for a long stretch there. We'll see if they bounce back against Skeens. It's going to be a tough evening for them.
Well, this to me just underscores what we've talked about for a while now, of how they gave themselves no margin for error, right? And it's like it takes so much time to just like almost get back to even, a little over 500, to like pull within a few games of a playoff spot. But when you do that, it can also just like vanish, maybe not vanish, but it can just go away so quickly, like that whether it's the momentum, the playoff odds creeping up, pulling within a couple of teams, passing a couple of teams, like you have to keep your foot on the accelerator the entire time, all the way through game 162 to give yourself a chance if you're in the Cubs position here. And as we're talking Tuesday morning here, 3.5 games behind the Braves, but it's really more like 4.5, right? Because they lost the season series against the Mets, are only half a game behind the Braves. So, the Cubs are still mathematically alive. I think they've certainly like passed the eye test more recently, and I'm not getting too hung up on, oh, they only beat, bad teams. Like, one, that's what you have to do. I think this has been a pretty mediocre year across baseball, right? I mean, there's been stuff on
Right.
the Athletic, like those 100-win behemoth teams aren't quite out there. And so, I don't know, is there anything you're taking away from that road trip, Sahadev, of like, is the offense closer to what Jed Hoyer described as, sixth most runs in baseball last year? Are you seeing good signs out of the bullpen? Do you think Counsell has maybe started to really trust, some of his coaches? What was when you left DC, and before what was kind of a disastrous late Labor Day night, what were your takeaways from that road trip?
Yeah, I mean, the offense clearly has turned a corner. It's just, the simplest way to put it is it's deeper, right? Like Amaya's hitting, Bethancourt is hitting, and then PCA looks like a different player. I think PCA is a menace on the base paths. He causes havoc every single time he gets on the bases. Dansby Swanson, for all the criticism he took, like he's really turned it around, and he's pushing for, to be almost as valuable as he was last year overall. He's an elite defender, obviously, and his offense now has been huge. I mean, the offense looks different. I dug into some of it, and some of it is like, okay, they needed to do this for a while. They're crushing fastballs, right? They hadn't been doing that. They needed to do that. There's some of it that's just like, I think is really about like, this is the randomness of baseball. I think they had 66 2-out RBI in August, and that was
wow.
That was like, I can't remember the exact number, like 6 or 8 fewer than they had in May and June combined. Now, like,
I believe it.
Yeah. Like they didn't just figure out how to hit with 2 outs, right?
Yeah,
like some of this is just like balls are falling. They're like teams are making mistakes and they're capitalizing on them. I mean, it even happened last night, Monday night, right? Like the 2 runs they scored to make it 3-0. PCA beat out a ball that should have been a routine double play ball, right? He beat out at second. That never happens.
Yeah.
And it's 2 outs and Ian Happ triples 2 runs in. Like that. Like that type of stuff just wasn't happening for the Cubs before, and that's not like just luck. It's the randomness of baseball. Sometimes things fall, and sometimes it happens in clusters. Now, I don't know if that's sustainable or if like they just need to hit. And ultimately, what I came away from when I started digging into the numbers of the offense is like they're not going to put up the same numbers that they did in August. They're just not. But they need to play. They need to pitch like they did yesterday. The starting pitching needs to pitch like that, and then they need to be an above average offense. Basically, if they can, they can't. It's going to be really hard to replicate August. I think they would have been on pace for like 950 runs if that's if that's how that's the pace they put up in August. So that's not going to happen.
Okay.
To just be an above average offense and continue pitching like they have, and they have a shot to have a good September. That's it. It's what's the likelihood that they catch the teams ahead of them? Not great, but just put up. You just got to do what you got to do, right? You got to try and win as many games as you can.
Congestion from sinuses, allergies, or a cold can be all-consuming.
That includes snoring for me. But Scotty, I found some relief from Navage Nasal Care. You've got to try this. Navage makes breathing easier. My Navage unit is a game changer for clearing my congestion fast.
Yeah, Kratz, Navage uses that smooth saline flow and nasal suction to clear those nasal passages.
It works for me, Scotty. I've noticed a huge difference since I started using Navage. I'm breathing better and the whole family is pumped that I've got the snoring under control.
We want to help you get relief from your congestion too. Our listeners can order a convenient Navage starter pack
including a nose cleaner with batteries included and 30 original salt pods. Everything you need to get started. Plus, get a cleaning kit as a free gift with your order, but only going to our exclusive URL, navage.com/FAL, and using our promo code FAL. Again, to order your Navage free cleaning kit and for full product details, go to navage.com/FAL. That's promo code FAL at navage.com/FAL.
One of the things that really kind of smacked me in the face here was just in part reading your coverage and also just taking a little bit of a step back last week of like what PCA might not have whatever like 1,000 OPS for his career or whatever he's doing now, and like Miguel Amaya might not hit like whatever Aaron Judge or Juan Soto. How he's had crazy numbers. We all realize they're going
Right.
to like if those guys are like legit everyday two-way players, it's kind of a mind-blowing development. And I think we operate at a time when prospects are just so overhyped, and like we've heard about these guys for so long. Like I remember talking to Miguel Amaya, might have been 2018 in South Bend, before he was going to the Futures game, and then with the COVID shutdown and other things, I hadn't seen him for a while, and I was very impressed. Like he came up to me years later, shook my hand and said, "Hey Patrick, how are you doing?" Like I was kind of blown away. That clearly there's something there. He's an intelligent guy. I think he's well liked. He does seem to care and puts in the work, but that doesn't mean you're a dude, right? Like maybe you're more of a career backup, but like if we were starting an expansion team tomorrow, like what would the two hardest things be to find? It might be a legit two-way center fielder and an everyday catcher.
Right.
Like Dansby is having, a decent year, but even if he was having a good year, he might be like the 16th, 17th best shortstop at baseball. I'm exaggerating here, but it's probably easier to find like a premium shortstop than those two positions. And if like PCA can do stuff like this for the next several years, and if Amaya is someone that the coaches and the pitchers trust and he can hit just enough, like that changes the calculus for me. Like that's like, okay, you have those two guys as anchors. That makes a really interesting sort of base to move from this offseason.
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to hype them too much because, like you said, repeating August over the span of 162 games just isn't happening. But especially with PCA, he's opened eyes and he just looks like a different player overall. I think a lot of credit should go to the hitting group, the hitting coaches. They stuck with them. They worked hard with them, and you're seeing real development at the major league level. That's something that we've talked about a lot over the years with this organization, and something that they want to see, and that Craig Counsell emphasizes. I think there was a lot of heat on the hitting coaches, right? When they slumped through May and June, when this team slumped through May and June, and clearly they're having an impact, especially on young players. You could say they're having an impact on some veterans too. The work that's been put in with Dansby, Michael Bush has had a great year. He's a young player, but these guys have gotten better as the year's gone on. I think that's on the players mostly, but especially with the young guys, the coaches get some credit there. I agree with what you said about Amaya being like, he is well liked, and I think that goes a long way. I think there's another aspect here about prospects that we need to consider that we've talked about a little bit, but not a ton. AAA to the majors is just such a huge jump, and part of the reason for that is because the lower minors has been gutted, right? Like we don't have short season baseball. When you draft 20 players or whatever, that means you're getting rid of 20 players too, right? Like and they just like AAA. I was talking to someone about this. They're like, think about it. Think about the competition. They're like, we really have to analyze like what type of competition are these guys facing? And I was like, yeah, some of them are just like 4A quality hitters, right? And they're like, not even that. They're like 2.5
Oof.
because they're getting pushed to higher levels,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like,
yeah.
so you have someone like Daniel Palencia, who is clearly a borderline major leaguer, right? Like an up and down
Yeah,
guy who
yeah.
goes to AAA and just dominates. And you're like,
Right.
you have to give this guy a chance. And then he comes up and he struggles, right?
Mhm.
So it's easy to say, like, I mean, you see like rehab performances and guys are just crushing the ball, and it's there's a pretty big gap here right now, and it takes a little while to adjust to the big leagues. I mean, Jackson Holliday is the number one prospect, and it took him
Yeah.
his second stint before he found his, really got going as a big
Mhm.
leaguer. It's just, it happens over and over again. Watching James Wood with Washington, it's not like they're still excited about him, but he's not consistently tearing the cover off the ball. Dylan Cruz had some great at bats, and then he looked flummoxed out there a couple of times too. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't. It's not the way. It doesn't feel like it did in 2015 when kids were coming up and just hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a bigger gap here, and it's going to be a tougher process, which is, when everyone's calling for minor leaguers to come up on September 1st and supplement the roster. First of all, where's the playing time? Are you sitting Ian Happ for Owen Casey? Are you sitting Seiya Suzuki? Is Michael Busch not playing anymore? Like what are you doing to get these guys at bats? That's one thing, and the other thing is you can't just assume that they're going to hit when they come up.
Yeah, I'm just on PCA's baseball reference page here. He made his major league debut on September 11th last year, and it's kind of just amazing how much he's grown. And we've talked about this before, just how understandably like jumpy he was and how hard he was trying to like make things happen. Just looked really rushed in center field or on the bases, and then just overmatched at the plate. And we realized it was a small sample size, but when the Cubs were spiraling early this year, I think we were kind of looking around like, well, where's that bounce? Where's that like push, that adrenaline from within? Like, where's that young talent? Like you everyone says you have this great farm system. Like, where is it? And when you see PCA just impacting the game in different ways, when you wrote about how he sort of gets in pitchers' heads, like that he can just make things happen by his presence. Like last night, up in the press box, looking at that ground ball through team double play, like 99 out of 100 times, and PCA beats it out, and then Hap gets that 2-out 2-run triple into the right field corner. Like when you have a guy like that who can just fly all over the field, it does. To me, it just like I said, kind of sort of hit me of like, oh wow, like this is not like, I think we've seen enough to not anoint PCA, but be like, okay, this guy is a true difference maker at the major league level, and like let's see what happens over the next several years.
Right. They had this stat on Marquee. I'm just double checking. I can't remember exactly what they showed, but I didn't realize it. But since July 27th, he has 36 hits. I believe that's right.
Okay.
So before that, including his cup of coffee last year, he had 32 hits. So just since July 27th, he has 4 more hits than he did in his entire career previous to that, which I mean just feels insane. Like over like a month and a week, essentially, he's put up the production that he did over the entire season plus that cup of coffee. He's just a different player right now. He's developed. He looks, what you said right there is, I think we're seeing happening, right? He has a chance to become an impactful player for years to come on this team, which changes a lot of the way you think about things with regards to this team. I think it's less so with Amaya, just because
agreed.
like there's so much that PCA does that kind of changes the way you do look at things and how he can impact the team. Not that Amaya isn't impactful. It's just that I'm not there yet. That I'm not sure that it's gonna stick as far as like him being an everyday player or the starting catcher going forward. And B, it's just what PCA does is electrifying. It's hard. It's hard not to like kind of just be on the edge of your seat watching him and kind of like, wow, this guy just changes games. He's someone you game plan for almost, and you have to like is in the mind of the opposition when he is on base, when he's playing defense, when whatever it is, even at the plate now. So he's kind of changing the narrative around his career already.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Like Amaya is a few years older than PCA. He plays a really demanding position. Like I don't know how many the catchers that you can really count on to be everyday types year after year after year. Not many of them floating around. That's why they get enormous contracts when they're able to stay healthy and productive and cash in. But I do think it was an interesting way to kind of look at this September here, that the Cubs are probably going to be mathematically alive for a good bulk of this month. So there will be something to play for, and that switch will be flipped towards like evaluation and like what does it mean moving forward. And we're talking about players like Amaya and PCA, a coaching staff that I think has done some really significant in-season things. We haven't even gotten to what you'd written about Mike Napoli and the base running, which has sort of taken off in a really interesting way after a slower start. And then just still, you kind of are what your record says you are. And I go back to what Tom Ricketts said at the end of last season, what he said in spring training. We don't play for consolation prizes, stressing that the payroll is more than enough to win a division, that years when the Cubs don't make the playoffs have to be considered disappointments. So like, I think it was Terry Francona. I remember him saying once, like, the season doesn't wind down. It just like comes to a complete abrupt jarring stop. Going from constantly worrying and thinking about things and having to be places to just nothing. I think it's going to be like that with the Cubs too, of just the vibes were great on the road and they looked good. And that's more of kind of what they expected, but still, they're still looking up at a lot of teams in the National League right now.
Yeah. I mean, they essentially can, I'm kind of guesstimating here, but I think I'm right on this. They can go 500 the rest of the way and win more games than last year. And okay. I don't think it's a stretch to say they'll go 500, right? Like they're playing enough baseball. They have an easy enough schedule. They're a good enough team. They're going to end up where both you and I kind of thought they would at the end of the season, right? I thought they'd have more wins because my whole thought process was they were going to be better at the deadline, and then they'll be aggressive and add someone that pushes them to another level. That didn't happen, but the talent that I saw on this team was like 85-ish wins. Yeah. And that's about where they're probably going to end up. And it's likely not going to be enough. They need to play at the clip they were playing at on the road. Well, maybe not on the road, but essentially, I think it was before. Yes. So now they're 12-4 in the 18-game stretch that we kind of circled, right? You want to go probably now you want to win this series and go 14-4. That they kind of have to go on that type of run again the rest of the season after these two Pirate games. And then you have to hope that Atlanta and New York are playing just like barely above 500. Long shot.
Yeah, not impossible. Not
impossible.
Either.
Not likely. Also, I think you're right. Like they can play great baseball down the stretch. They can look like their progress was made, and ultimately the season is a disappointment. I don't want to call it a failure when players develop and Craig Counsell kind of observes and sees like these coaches are making a difference. I need to make adjustments here, and like, or Justin Steele takes another step forward in his season. Jameson Tyne stabilizes, Shota Imanaga, all these things. There's a lot of steps forward. Doesn't mean it's acceptable and that fans should be happy coming up short. Sets them up nicely for 2025, big offseason that we've been talking about. Whether they were good or not, all that stuff. When I say big offseason, I mean critical, like important.
Yeah.
I not spending $500 million on Juan Soto. You can spin it however you want. Ultimately, not making the playoffs is a disappointment, and I don't want to crush optimists' hopes, but that's likely where they're headed, just falling short, even if they have a strong finish here, which they're primed to do. But that's ultimately what this season is looking like.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to write this in my story off of Monday, but I had kind of filed it away for this conversation. We're going to be talking about it, like, was the season a failure or not if they don't make the playoffs? And I just go back to, we're both old enough to remember when the Cubs just gutted their coaching staff after a third straight trip to the NLCS. Guys who helped them win their first World Series title in 108 years. I mean, they kind of blew out their coaching staff again after winning 95 games in 2018. I think after that 95 win season, was that when Theo said our offense broke? When he had that, might have been like a 75, 90 minute press conference of just this sort of one-man show of airing grievances and frustrations and disappointments. And I still think that has to be the center of everything an organization does, of getting towards October. And that if you write off too much for development and, saying positive things, if you're not in the playoffs, particularly in an expanded playoff field in one of the major's worst divisions, and one in which you're the big market team, and when the Cardinals, Reds, and Pirates all have remained either stagnant or plateaued or taken or kind of drifted backwards, and you took the Brewers manager, this hometown hero, away from them, and they still run away with the division. That's going to be the tension to me of all those exit meetings and off-season planning sessions.
Absolutely. No, I agree with all of that. All right, they have a big one tonight, in my opinion. I'm very curious to see how especially the offense looks. That they're going to need to step up with Kyle Hendricks on the mound. You just don't know what you're going to get from Kyle Hendricks. He could put up a good game, but you just don't know. And the offense needs to kind of step up and grind through Paul Skeens as best they can. It's not an easy task, but I think that's what lays ahead of them tonight, because you do not want to lose this series. You need to try and start getting back on the winning track and take this series and hopefully take one from the Yankees over the weekend to kind of feel good about the rest of the month and their chances to kind of, make a run here. All right, that's our first episode this week of Northside Territory. Thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, and subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I will be writing about the Cubs all month and into the off season. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Appreciate it. Take care.